Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, and all people of the world, we're back with Ken and Mike for another installment of My Uncle's Escaped Alcatraz. And we're still talking about some of these questions that everybody has, which I thought, you guys have been great. And like I said, keep them coming because it's like they're great because it just it jars a lot of information that we're trying to go. And as we stated last week, some of those questions that we may or may not answer regarding to our investigation down in Brazil, we're going to have to hold off on because we have some people down there working for us right now, trying to find some answers for us, and we don't want to say anything yet because we don't know. But we're getting closer. But we have a team working actively right now down there, and hopefully we'll have some more information for you for that. So Ken and Mike, what's going on, and who do we want to start off with first for their first question that I think that we haven't answered yet? We had a whole list. The one that you sent me, Mike, is this Olivia Gabrielle?
Yep.
Okay, so I think that's another Brazil question now. If John and Clarence had established families in Brazil and therefore could not be extradited. Oh, no, we did talk about that. Here's the one. This is for both of you guys. He goes, what type of media or book or documentary would be released detailing John and Clarence families in Brazil if the case is closed? Now, one of the things this is kind of related to the Brazil thing. And, all I can say is we are actively pursuing a television documentary deal right now. We are in talks with several people, and as far as an addendum to the book and stuff like that, I mean, you guys gotta have to address that one.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, one of the things that when we were working on the book, how do you end the story that hasn't ended yet? And it was sort of a struggle to finish the book and give it a satisfying ending, but also sort of communicate the idea that the search is not over, because we have, as you've pointed out many times, we have a lot of circumstantial evidence that shows that John and Clarence made it. We have documentation. The FBI kind of talks about it at some level, not a case closed. Hey, we found them down there. Of course, we have the Fred Breezy tape where he talks about visiting the brothers, and of course the photographs that he gave to his mother. We have other people like his brother Alfred, who talked about, I know my brothers are alive. He admitted this to his cellmate before he died. You have Uncle Man's deathbed confession of, I've been in contact with him for the last 25 years. Helen, who was John's girlfriend, almost wife, said that, she had talked to him on the phone on the Fred Breezy tape, which was obviously after the escape. So we have documentation, we have evidence, but it's not the final evidence that everyone, and including ourselves, want. And so when we finished the book, the last line of the book, well, before the last line, the last page of the book, speaking in Ken's voice, saying, I've committed myself to finding my uncles. That's been my goal since 2012, since the 50th anniversary. And he's talked many times about his experience with a lot of the people who spoke against his uncles, and feeling like they're speaking out of ignorance. They don't know who he is, or they are, excuse me. Mm-hmm. And so he made a commitment to himself and to his family, like, I'm going to find them. I want to know what happened to them. And so that's what ultimately led to the book. And so based on the evidence that we present in the book, and basically says, I fulfilled that promise. I believe I found them, and here's the evidence to support my view. And then the very last line of the book is, next step, find their families. That's the second part of the journey, and that's why we're here now. This is the second part of the journey. And so when we connected with you and Cindy, when we first reached out to you about, it was only supposed to be a one and done, hey, we'd like to do a podcast with you and tell our story and then move on. And you were immediately talking to like, no, this is a bigger story. We want to do a podcast that is multiple episodes. we want to start looking for. We want to help you. We've got resources. We know people.
Mm-hmm.
It has expanded, obviously, since the podcast has started.
27 hours.
Mhm.
Right. We've been doing this for 6 months now. We started way back when. So, and now we've got boots on the ground in Brazil who are continuing the search, places we couldn't go, people we wouldn't know who to reach out to. And we feel we're getting close. So this is part 2 of the story of we want to bring, because everyone keeps asking about, where's that absolute proof
Mhm.
that closes this case. And we hope we're getting close to that. We have some very strong leads, and like you said, in the near future, we hope to have some announcements and have some exciting news.
Yeah. How about you, Ken?
Well, I agree with Mike. When we first went down this road of writing the book, there was so much more that I felt like we could have added to the book, just the story of the John and Clarence. And in fact, the book actually, I believe when we ended it, it was at 500 pages or close to 500 pages. And the editor said, no, we got to trim this back. Even Mike said they're not going to produce a 500-page book. So there's so much more that we want to add into it. But I agree with Mike. At this point, I think we've accomplished what I had set out for, which was to introduce John and Clarence to the public, to tell a backstory about them, how they got to Alcatraz. When they got to Alcatraz, the people that they worked with that helped them get to the bay, and then the people that helped them from the bay all the way down into eventually Brazil. So now the next part of the story is finding, if John and Clarence is still alive, finding them or finding their wife, finding their children, their grandchildren. Because once we find them, they're going to have photos, they're going to have stories that will continue this story on. And we're going to find out I believe, some pretty interesting things. But the thing is, with this story is that it's like finding a needle in a haystack. And the haystack is sitting, 3,000 miles away in another country. And so, we're very limited on what we could do. So having people on the ground like you were able to help us get on the ground, I believe is going, and we know the location. We needed someone there that can speak the language, that can go visit these places, which is what this person is doing. And I believe we're going to find them. I believe we're going to find their families. And we're going to put this story to bed once and for all. Because I would hate to be the people that were on the naysay side when we put the final nail in the coffin.
Well, yeah. I mean, hopefully it's not a coffin that we're putting a nail in. Maybe
the story itself.
No, what I'm just saying is maybe we find, maybe John's alive. I mean, I think we're pretty certain that Clarence probably has passed on, right. But there is a possibility that John could be alive, and that's
very well.
So, and I don't know. I mean, I just think, how old is your mother now?
My mother is 89.
She's 89. God bless her. So to me, it's like, at least for me and Cindy, I mean, because we were talking about this the other day, and sorry, Cindy's not here, but she's working today and she wasn't able to skate away. But we were talking about how amazing it's going to be because I'm saying because I'm confident as well that we're going to find something, that we find evidence of her brothers that made it and lived a fruitful life for, a fairly long, for most of their life, because when they were, I mean, I can't remember, how old were they when they were inside Alcatraz?
When they left, they were in their early 30s.
Early 30s. So they lived most of their adult life outside of a prison. And I'm sure that probably makes her very happy. And that they, based upon the preliminary information we have, is that we believe that, they did what Whitey told them to do. They went down there, they met some women, they got married, they had kids, they had a farm, and they lived out their life in Brazil. So we were thinking about how important this is to do this, not only for you, Ken, but for your mom, and while she's still here. And I can't imagine how that would affect her, knowing that all of that stuff. Have you ever had any conversations with her about that?
Oh yes. I've actually spoke to her a couple of days ago, and I told her that I felt like we were very close in finding someone down there, and she just gets excited every time I tell her this information. She envisions. She tells me she will never travel again, but she said I would get on a plane and fly to Brazil if you find my brothers. So yes,
or better yet, she finds a great niece or
yes.
something, some sort of connection to the brothers. I had a similar situation where I had someone around your mother's age who was a World War II veteran who I brought back off the coast of Ireland to go see meet the people that rescued him after he crashed his B-17 off the coast of Ireland. He was flying the last weather reconnaissance flight for the D-Day invasion, and they had an engine failure and they had to crash, and so Ireland had to spirit them out through Northern Ireland because Ireland was neutral at that time, and so they didn't want to get bombed, because they were bombing England and London, and they didn't want to be bombed either, so they spirit him out. But he was like, I had to take him to a doctor to get it, and this was a Discovery show, and I had to take him to a doctor to get a physical, and they basically said the doctors wouldn't sign off on it, and the older gentleman said, listen, I'm going, so whether or not you sign off on it or not, Right. And he goes, well, you may die over it. He goes, well, so be it. He goes, I want to find out these answers. Right. So it's like, I just think it's so amazing, number one, that your mom's still alive, and also she has another sister alive, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, she has a younger sister, and we've kept both of them kind of up to date as we kind of move forward, and both of them are, they're not at the point that they could travel, but both of them have already told me that if we find John and Clarence, or just John, or one of them alive, they would definitely be traveling down there. And I could actually see them going too if we find their children. So I can just see one big Anglin family reunion again.
I was going to say it's the most insane family reunion. I mean, there's been some pretty insane family reunions where people have been divided by, crazy circumstances, whether it was war or separated at birth and stuff like that. But this would be truly a monumental family reunion. And the fact that, doing the math, that he could still, one of them or John could still be alive, that would be something, fantastic as well.
Well, and that's not only would Ken's family obviously be just thrilled that these men that they've grown up with and all the stories and all the lore that surround them over the years, we know what finally happened, but there's literally millions of people who follow the Alcatraz story or know the Alcatraz story. Some of them, follow our this podcast and our Facebook page and so forth, who want to know, they want the answers. They're getting a little impatient, like, come on, guys, give me the answer. What's happening? And
we're moving as fast as we can.
Right. 1 to 2 million people visit Alcatraz every year, and largely because of the escape. They get to visit the cells. They see what the cells look like. They're going there largely because of that, because of John and Clarence and Frank Morris. So, last week or 2 weeks ago, they had the big news on Everest that they found, there was George Mallory in 1924 that they're not sure if he made it to the top, and they found him back in 99. Well, and 2 weeks ago, they finally found the guy he was climbing with. His name is Andrew Irvine. So they finally found him. Now, what they're trying to find is the camera they brought that, the photographs would definitively reveal whether or not they made it to the top. They got really close. Mm-hmm. But it was a global story. It was everywhere. It was all over the news, all over the media, about this mystery of, did they make it to the top of Everest back in 1924, 100 years ago? or Amelia Earhart or Jimmy Hoffa or D.B. Cooper or John Kennedy. It's that caliber of a mystery of, did these guys actually make it? And we finally have the proof. This is going to be huge when we finally reveal, yes, we found them. It's going to be crazy media, because there's that much interest in the story of, a lot of the questions we have are from people in different parts of the world who follow what we're doing. So this isn't just a United States story or a California story. This is a global story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people in other countries follow this story. They when they come over to America, a lot of them, that's the first place they want to go to is Alcatraz.
Yeah, I mean, it was when I went to San Francisco the first time, it's the first thing I did was go to Alcatraz.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like, there's a lot of cool things to do in San Francisco, but to me, that's like, you can't be anywhere in San Francisco or in the Bay Area where you cannot see it.
That's correct.
Yep.
It's
just like, it's like in the center, it's like the center of the wheel of that area. And it just kind of like, it just looms there, and it's just like you sit there. And I remember the first time I saw it and when I went there, yeah, you do you go there because, people escaped there. You go there because Al Capone was there, but I was more interested in the escape as opposed to the Al Capone thing. But it is definitely, it's a beacon. And so I just think, like I said before, when Cindy and I we were just sitting around on the couch talking about it. And Cindy was like, he goes, I can't imagine what's going to go through Ken's mother and aunt's mind if this comes to fruition, if we find family members, we find, definitive evidence that they made it out down there. And it helps connect the final dot that all of the work that you guys have done and the fact, and also kind of really kind of dispels our government's myth on how they just, they didn't really follow up on it. And if they did follow up on it, they didn't really produce or information to the public on what they did and how it just kind of let it float away and why they let it float away for whatever reason. And, we've talked about those reasons. Was there really more going on to their escape? The whole thing with the Chief Justice and letting Mickey Cohen out. I mean, we heard, Art said never been done before. We heard Lenny say it's never been before. Doesn't know why it was done. I mean, there's just so many elements here that, that have, and I just know you said, Mike earlier, that you have a lot of circumstantial evidence. I wouldn't, circumstantial evidence is evidence. Mm-hmm. And, we deal with, a lot of legal cases and, and our podcasts and, we've done a documentary film on wrongful convictions. And I remember attorney said to me, he says, listen, circumstantial evidence is evidence. Okay. I mean, you can convict on that. You can put someone away for life on circumstantial evidence, even if it's one piece.
Right.
So
that's something I told Art, Art and I used to argue all the time. I would bring up the circumstantial evidence that I had, and he would, try to tear it down. And I would just say, hey, Art, they convict people every day on circumstantial evidence. But, I reminded him because he believed that because there was no evidence of them afterwards, that's the reason why, he believes that they drowned. And I was like, well, wait a minute. No evidence is not evidence. Circumstantial evidence is evidence, but you can't come in and say, well, just because they didn't reoffend and that means that they must have drowned. That doesn't mean that you have no evidence and that's evidence that you're going to present. So,
yeah, no. Like I said,
there's a difference between the two.
Yeah, there's a difference between the two, but it's still, I mean, we can't say it's fact yet, but, in our preliminary investigation that we started months ago, and now we've kind of upgraded it with some horsepower with people who do this professionally, who've done this on a federal level and in both countries. So it's like now we're in a position where, and they did, and that's how they deal with stuff. They deal with like information, and they deal with facts. And so they're trained to find people. And the one thing that they did say is that the preliminary information that we gave them was really good, a really good starting point. And so hopefully, they're down there now and they're pounding the pavement, and they're finding these people. I wish I could reveal more to you right now, but I don't want to, because I think it's going to, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up, but all I can say is that this thing is escalated, and it's hot. It's a hot investigation. And like I said, to me, after the initial shock of us finding someone or something to really verify all this, to me, it's going to be really interesting to kind of, I want to see your mother's expression. I really do. Because that, to me, it's just like on a personal, because that's why you did it. I mean, this was like a personal family story.
Yes.
And, and like I said, it wasn't until you were later on in life that you really kind of took hold of it. And that's what happens sometimes, like when as I got it, like my mother passed away a few years ago, and I spent the last 3 months with her in the house I grew up in, and a lot of it. And I did the same thing with my dad when he passed away. But what happened is they wanted me to go through, because I was like mostly the only one in my family that has been very interested in our family history. And so I would go through pictures with them and all these documents and old Western Union things that I would find in this stuff. And it was like, it really, obviously, my family history isn't as interesting as yours, but it was like, there was a lot of mystery there. There was a lot of mystery, and like people back then didn't really talk about stuff that happened. That generation, they just left the past in the past. They didn't really talk about it. So I find it was really interesting when you started digging into your family's past and realized, wow, there's a lot more here than I thought there was. And I think we talked a little bit about it, but remind me again when you had that aha moment where you decided, I really kind of need to find out this mystery.
Well, like I've said before, in 2012 is really what put me on the track of wanting to find out what happened to my uncles. Just the way that people were categorizing them and describing them. And, I knew from just the stories that I had heard from my mom and my other aunts and uncles that this really just could not be the way that it happened. And I would have to say the biggest moment that happened as far as really kind of putting the puzzle together of this, finding that missing piece, was whenever I found out about Mickey Cohen. Because when I started looking into, like I said, I even said the very first time I heard that name, that someone had told me that was what was in the FBI files. I was like, who the hell is Mickey Cohen? I didn't even know who he was. And so after I started digging, a lot of then the stories that I had heard about John and Clarence, things that they did, started kind of making sense. Like, oh my gosh, the reason why Uncle Man is the only member of the family that has ever been polygraphed, not only by the FBI, but by the U.S. Marshals. Well, he's the one who tells Alfred in prison that it was Mickey Cohen. Like, how does he know Mickey Cohen? And so the authorities knew this. So then I started going, okay, well, now that makes sense. And then, when I find out that, he lived in Los Angeles, well, wait a minute, that kind of makes sense as to why the brothers traveled out to California. And Clarence has a car that he drove back from California that has California license plates. It's registered in the state of California. And then when he gets caught, he gives the address to where they're heading to. And it's an address in downtown, in California, in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's in LA County.
Yeah. So, I mean, all these items started kind of coming together. Like they go out to California, they're broke as hell. They come back and they're rich as hell. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, they have money left and right. John's buying a brand new car.
Yeah, I have a question for you before I forget it. Did you guys ever look into to see if Mickey Cohen had any family, any existing family?
I think he had a daughter, I believe.
I do believe he had a daughter, but I did not try to track her down. No, I mean that's a very interesting, you know, way of looking at it, because she might actually know something, I guess, unless maybe he didn't.
Yeah, I mean, she could still be alive.
Yeah. But you know, it was like I said, it was that finding that one piece of the puzzle that really started making sense for everything else. You know, I mean, it backed up the story of Officer Chechi. You know,
Yep.
I mean, okay, my gosh, that's exactly what Uncle Man said that Mickey Cohen was going to do, was provide them a boat. It made sense as to why I had an aunt and an uncle out in California during that escape, and my uncle,
And they'd never been out there before.
Never been out there before, and my uncle drove or worked on large fishing boats, so he knew how to drive a fishing boat. So I mean,
were they from Ruskin as well?
Yes, they were.
Okay,
and they came back right after the escape, so they were only out there. They said they were out there. In fact, I don't even know if the FBI knew they were out there. Uncle Man revealed it to that skip tracer when he was being interviewed. And I asked my mom about it. She said, and I even found a letter from, I believe it was Alfred had written one of the family, his mom, and he was talking about this aunt and uncle that I'm referring to. I won't mention their names right now. He said, I'm glad they're coming back from California. I didn't really think that they would enjoy California. So they were out there during that time frame. And when my mom told me what my uncle used to do for a living, I was like, you're kidding me. Like, he worked on a fishing boat. This was a fishing boat that picked him up.
Well, it's logical. I mean, I lived in Tampa Bay area. I mean,
if Mickey Cohen was going to provide the funds and the boat, wouldn't you need someone that knew how to drive it?
Someone you could trust.
Someone that you could trust, and someone that knew how to operate a fishing boat. I mean, according to Officer Chechi, this wasn't a small fishing boat. This isn't like a little bass boat that someone goes out and fishes in the bay. This was a large fishing boat with the kind of fishing equipment, the poles that they let down into the water.
Yep.
I mean, it's very large. So it wouldn't be like just anyone would know how to drive that boat.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's just so many things that started clicking into place when I discovered Mickey Cohen. And from that point on, then it's like I told someone one day too, when we were writing this story and we were doing the research for Alcatraz, we found another story within Alcatraz. There's a story embedded in this book that I really believe is probably going to be as important one day when we have some more evidence as the escape itself.
And you believe that's the Mickey Cohen story? I
believe that's the Mickey Cohen and the JFK story.
Yes. And then what I'd love to see, and I don't know how deep that you guys got as far as Mickey Cohen's concerned, but I'd love to see in those. I mean, I don't know how much that they revealed any of the files that you were able to get a hold of in regards to Mickey Cohen. What did they, and how much you could see to kind of really understand what you're talking about right now when you're talking about the story within the story.
Well, I mean, so when we were doing the research for Mickey, of course, I wanted to know who his friends were. And, quickly, one of the first persons that I came across was Candy Bar. And when I read about how that...
Now, is Candy Bar her actual birth name, or is that her, pseudonym?
That was her stage name.
God. Do we know what her real name was?
I'll get it here.
I do, but So, but when I found out that he hid her out in Mexico at at his farm, and then I started thinking, wait a minute, this is the same thing that Fred Priestley said, right? He said when we landed the plane just north of Mexico City to refuel it, they were already on their way to somewhere in Mexico. John clearly has already been to Mexico. If you ever seen that photo of him standing in front of his car, he has a Mexican license plate or a vanity plate on the front of it. Like, why would you have that if you lived in Ruskin, Florida? I mean, how far away from Mexico could you be? And so,
at that time it was further. I mean, now it's not that far. You could get to Mexico very quickly, but everyone drove. No one flew as much as they fly now.
So then of course, when I read about the Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren signing his bond, I'm not going, what? This is the same guy that heads up eventually Johnson when he becomes president. Talked him into heading up the commission on the JFK assassination. And then I find out, oh, wait a minute, not only is Candy Barr got this relationship with Mickey Cohen, but so does Jack Ruby. Oh, wait a minute, Jack Ruby is the one who kills Oswald. That's like, so now you've got these people.
What was the piece of information that connected those two, the Jack Ruby and the Mickey Cohen? Where did you see that? Was that in FBI files or was that?
Well, that's just out. I mean, it's out there as far as their relationship. It's documented in other materials that I think we came across. There was one book that someone had done on him and the friends of the people that he was related to. But what really kind of tied it in, though, was Candy Barr, because Candy Barr was his girlfriend who he wanted to marry, which was also good friends with Jack Ruby. In fact, Jack Ruby is the one who comes to visit her with the other individual in the car that she later would identify as Oswald right before the killing of JFK. I mean, there are documents out there all over the place that Jack Ruby and Mickey Cohen were good friends.
Yeah. Candy Barr's real name is Juanita Slusher, which is an interesting name. That's her real name.
I can understand why she changed it.
Yeah. She was a stripper in a lot of places, but she was in Dallas for quite a long time. And that's how she got to know Jack Ruby. He wanted her to be with her in the Carousel Club, but she never did. But, she was like in a strip joint down the street. I guess there was an area where that form of entertainment was prolific. And so years later, after she went to Mexico with Mickey Cohen's help, because there was a drug charge against her, she flees to Mexico. Mickey helps her, and then she comes back after a while because she gets kind of bored just sitting in Mexico for nothing to do. And as soon as she comes back in the U.S., she gets arrested, and she spent several years in a women's prison. And when she gets released, she goes to be with her family in Edna, Texas, and Jack Ruby would visit her. This was before the assassination. He would visit her.
Texas. So now there you go, Texas.
Right. She was in Dallas, and then she wasn't also in Los Angeles too. I mean, we have in the book photographs of Mickey Cohen and Candy Barr together. One in the club, and another one when Mickey was. There is an FBI file that is released on Mickey Cohen that anybody can look at, and so I'm sure Ken has gone through it. I've gone through it. It doesn't talk about anything Alcatraz related. There's nothing there for that. But it does talk a lot about his time in Los Angeles in the 40s and 50s and early 60s. And one of the things that comes up a lot is that he's being harassed by the police constantly, and he really bugs them. He feels he's being persecuted. He finally sued the Los Angeles Police Department, saying they're violating his constitutional rights because they would get him on just these little petty things. And he felt that it was the Kennedy brothers that were really pulling the strings with the LAPD. And so, when he was doing one of the lawsuits against the police department, there's a picture of him with Candy Barr. She was there to support him in the courthouse as he was kind of going through these legal proceedings. So a lot of documentation of Mickey and Candy.
Have you seen a copy of that photograph?
Well, it's in the book.
Oh, it's in the book. Okay, I can
Yeah,
remember.
they're both. There are two photographs of them together in the book. One of them of him in the Carousel Club. I'm sorry, not the Carousel Club. I forgot the name of it. The one that was in Los Angeles. The club where he was entertaining in Los Angeles. That's where Fred Breezy goes out and meets Cohen. That's what we have in the book. And the other one is the court trial. When they're together, they're filmed together, photographed together. So yeah, he wanted to marry her. He just absolutely loved her, and she didn't feel the same way. She liked him a lot, spent a lot of time with him, but just ultimately it didn't work out between them. And then eventually she goes back to Texas after she, where she really builds on her friendship with Jack Ruby. He would go out. They both had a love of dogs. She loved dogs. He loved dogs. And we have a story in the book where he visits her and because he wanted to give her some of his dogs, and he was also trying to get her to be a stripper in his club, but she never did. So
yeah,
like Ken
where
said,
was his club again? I can't remember.
The one in Los Angeles,
The one in Dallas.
He had one in Dallas.
Yeah, I don't remember the one in Dallas.
Yeah, Jack Ruby owned the one in Dallas.
Yeah, that he owned the Carousel Club.
Right, and then Mickey Cohen had one in Los Angeles.
Got it.
But
what you've described there and all that stuff. I mean, talking about Mickey Cohen getting harassed by law enforcement for everything, and he believed that the Kennedys were involved in that, and we do know that they were cracking down on organized crime. To me, all this smells like motive.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. But what's interesting is, why didn't they investigate that part of it at all?
Well, in addition to both on the criminal side, and I'm sure the opposing forces in the government side that were not pleased that JFK's policies and what he wanted to do. I mean, there's documentation and there's also recordings of JFK basically talking to Bobby, saying how they're going to kill him. Right. They're not going to let me do anything here. I'm not going to have any power. I have no power. Basically said, I have no power here. Where he's basically revealing to Bobby that this, the U.S. government is a cabal, and that he's just, the president is just merely a puppet and and a figurehead, and that all the other machinations behind there, and as long as you play along, you're good. And
I mean, both JFK and his brother both wanted to pull out of Vietnam. That Vietnam was just getting going, and of course we see what happens once Johnson gets into the Oval Office. I mean, he ramps up Vietnam like nobody's business. And so
they had JFK who wanted to get out.
Yep.
And so they, if you, for a lack of a better term, and I think a lot of people, I'd be curious if Trump does get elected, if he's going to, because he's promised Bobby Kennedy Jr. that he's going to release those files to really find out if this was in fact what everybody suspects, that it was a coup, an internal coup. And then you have the other person, and so you got Johnson that comes in there, and then he ramps up Vietnam and doing what Dwight D. Eisenhower, the president, basically said, be careful of the industrial war complex. It's there, it's real, and don't abuse it. And he warned them about that. And that's someone who was who basically helped win the war, World War II. And then you have Johnson in there ramping up. And then you have Nixon who gets in there, who eventually wants to get out. And then somehow, there's been new reports about that. There's a new book that's been written by who just came out. This author, I can't remember his name. I just saw him on a interview, but basically saying that Nixon's ouster was an organized coup too, because he wanted to get out of Vietnam. And, the whole thing was, because they're talking about Woodward and Bernstein, but, Bob Woodward, his first job, I mean, his job before he became at the Washington Post was a naval intelligence officer. So how do you go from being a naval intelligence officer to being a, top reporter at Washington Post? And literally one of the first stories he's working on is the Watergate story. So another rabbit hole.
Right.
But there are documents and books being written about this, and it's in the same way we're talking about Mickey Cohen.
Mhm.
To me, it's like you got to go with logic, and like you said, the logic of Mickey Cohen being, antagonized by the Kennedy administration, and then the government wanting Kennedy, not happy with what his platforms were and what he wanted to do. And, you had J. Edgar Hoover was not a fan of Kennedy. It's like, you got opposing forces here. Now you have all this other stuff that's going on. So and like you said earlier, there's a story within the story of your uncle's escape. And I think it's just kind of, I'm dying to find out if we'll ever really find that connection, if there's some connection to those two stories, your uncle's escape and the connection to the JFK assassination.
Well, I mean, like I said, we stumbled upon this story as we're writing the Alcatraz story. I mean, I had no desire to try to find some story that I thought was there. I mean, I wanted to tell the story about my uncles, but it was during that prep of that I just kept thinking, how odd is this? Especially when I would read like the Supreme Court Justice of the United States is the one who let Mickey Cohen out of Alcatraz. I mean, I've never heard of that in my life.
Yeah.
And then, he's working with John in the clothing room before he leaves. He's out for 7 months. Why in the heck would you not flee and leave the country like everybody's telling you, all the other inmates are telling you to do? No, he comes back and then goes back to work with John in the clothing room. And then just a few weeks later, the escape occurs. Now, something we never really kind of talked about either is that when Mickey Cohen came back, which would have been in late April, close to May, that's when John and them decided to rebuild the raft. This is when they built the second raft. Because, I mean, even Wes talks about this. He's like, well, John felt like they needed a new raft, and so they went and rebuilt another one. It's like, why would they spend all that time building the first raft? And we know it worked because they tested it out in the FBI files, and it would, held air for hours with weights in it. So we know it worked. Why would you abandon that one to go build another one, and you only have just a few weeks to do it? Well, you would need something if you
new information. They got new information.
Yeah. So Mickey Cohen comes back and tells them, I'm going to provide a boat out in the middle of the bay for you. You got to figure out how to get there. And of course, John's already been thinking we could use the prison boats to pull us. But in order to be pulled, you got to have an eye in the front of that boat, right? Front of that raft has got to have something that you can tie the rope to. So the very first one doesn't have that. In fact, I've seen a picture of the first one. It doesn't have that eye in it. Much like the Popular Mechanics magazine that they find that shows that raft with an eye on the front of it. That's what John and them went back and rebuilt. They rebuilt it so that it could be pulled.
One thing I just want to throw in there, just to add a little more to this part of the conversation. Before I do, I just want to go back to Candy Bar. She was at the Largo Club in Los Angeles. That's where her and Mickey used to hang out. The Largo Club.
But Mickey didn't own that one, did he?
No, he didn't own it, but he was a visitor there, and I think it was on Sunset Boulevard, I believe, either that or Van Nuys, one or the other. Anyway, getting back to the raft, when Ken and I did the Expedition Unknown episode, Ken and Josh and Stuart recreate. They're the three escapees on the raft in the episode. I'm safely on the boat. So I was supposed to be on the raft, and I just didn't have the wherewithal to do that. I think
that was a smart move.
Yeah, I've had some bad water experiences, and I would have become part of the story had I been out there. But anyway, so they have a boat that they tie the raft to, and the boat is pulling them from Alcatraz all the way to the pier. And they didn't quite make it. They got really, really close. But what happened was, in the front of the raft that they were using, there's like a little plastic handle that you use to pick it up or pull the raft, carry it somewhere. Well, the handle broke. The rope didn't snap, but the handle broke, and so they lost the rope, and so they kind of had to drift to the pier. They were maybe just a couple hundred feet from it, so they practically made it. So the handle wasn't strong enough to pull them. They're 3 grown men.
Mhm.
So because you can think, well, why couldn't they just glued on an eye on the old raft? Well, it needed to be reinforced. It had to be really, really strong, and they knew this obviously because they abandoned the old raft and created a new one. So the front had to be extra strong to take the weight. They just their minds knew that the old raft, you just couldn't slap some glue on it and that'd be good enough. So it had to be redesigned.
And two, you have the testimony of the Alcatraz guard and his partner who find the raft. I mean, we've shared this story with you, and they find the raft not on Angel Island, kind of like behind Angel Island, but he talks about when they found it, they tied up to it and pulled it behind their boat back to Alcatraz. Well, if you're going to pull something, you had to have some way and a means to tie to it, right? I mean, There had to be some type of an eye on the front of that boat for them to tie to it and pull it with their boat. And it was undoubtedly large enough that they couldn't just lift it up and put it into their boat.
Yeah, and the fact that they were able to do that, and they would have to test it before they actually used it in the water. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, these guys, just the level of sophistication and tenacity to be able to kind of invent something like that with like whatever you have. It's like such a, they were like the MacGyver before the MacGyvers.
Yes, they were. Yes.
So it's like,
totally agree.
I'm dating that reference, but the MacGyver, for people who don't know, is he could make, it's a TV show where he could make anything out of anything in any situation.
But also too, I mean, they waited till the last night. They still had work to do on the raft. So I go back again. It was so important that Monday night that they leave, whether or not that was the only night the boat was going to be in the bay, or maybe it was only there for 2 nights. Who knows? All I know is I can't imagine them going, we have to go tonight. Oh, but wait a minute. The boat's not completely finished yet. Don't worry about it. We'll get it finished. It's like, why would you finish it Monday night and then go Tuesday night? Why didn't you go up there and work on it if it only had just a little bit left to do? Why not wait until it was completely done?
Yeah.
You decided to go, because once you left, you were pretty much, that was it. You wasn't coming back. I mean, once you got out of the top of that vent, that was it.
That was it. I want to go back to the Supreme Court thing real quick, because in the book, and then what I found online as the article that talks about Mickey Cohen getting bonded out for, I think it was like $100,000 or something like that.
It was $100,000.
How many newspaper articles ran that? How many newspapers ran that story?
The
article looks very small.
Yes. I looked for it, but it was only one newspaper that I came across, and it was a newspaper out of the San Francisco area. I don't ever remember it being picked up like a national type, news. It was only in one little article about him bonding out of Alcatraz, which to me, I would have thought that would have been a huge story because no one's ever done that.
It's a big, pardon my expression, friggin' story.
You would think so. And two, like I said, how many people have ever had their bond signed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? Well, I guess today that would be who's the Chief Justice today? It's
Roberts.
Could you even imagine anyone, especially a criminal, having their bond signed by Roberts to get out of prison.
I know. And, you know, someone like that can't even get a cup of coffee without it making major news, you know?
No.
So the fact that it was someone so notable
Right.
that, you know, like Mickey Cohen, and that it was such a small, is there any way we can find out what that newspaper was?
I believe I have that newspaper. I can, I at that time was saving off articles as I found them. I'd have to go back through my list of articles, but yeah, we
There's
can
no,
definitely find
I don't
it.
think there's a byline either, is there?
No. It wasn't a very big article. It was really short.
Because it's almost like they did it just so they had a public record of it, almost like, you know, that it wasn't. So if anything ever came back to him, they said, well, you know, we made it known, you know.
There is just too many connections in the JFK assassination that, I mean, players that had major connections to the story, how that they were at some point in time had some interaction with each other.
I know.
That's what blows my mind. And as we were putting this together, I kept going, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. Like,
I have to go back and watch the Oliver Stone movie with Kevin Costner, because he did one of the things that he did really well is he really kind of interwove all of those seedy characters, you know, and all the stuff. So I'd be curious to see what that has to do. See if I can find any kind of Mickey Cohen connections or anything like that. Plus he's done some pretty amazing. His last documentary on it was pretty amazing. I have to go back and watch that.
yeah, I mean, you know, it's amazing that no one tied in. Here you got a crime boss that hated the Kennedys. The Kennedys are the ones who put him in Alcatraz, you know, and all of a sudden now when he is out or when Kennedy is killed, a good friend of his, Jack Ruby, who, you know, now you got Candy Bar tied in between these two individuals. He's the one who kills Oswald. She testifies that Oswald and Ruby had just come back from Mexico, stops by her house. Jack's giving her a puppy, and she offers the individual in the car a glass of water. He refuses to say he doesn't want it. And then she recognizes him a couple of days later when the assassination occurs. And then Jack Ruby is the one who shoots Oswald. But how does that even happen?
I know.
And then he refuses to talk to anyone. In fact, I think there was one reporter who, you know, this is the story too. I don't know how many, if you remember this. There's only one reporter that had the chance to talk to Jack Ruby. And Jack Ruby was going to tell her something. And she mysteriously turned up dead.
Yeah.
She died of some circumstantial evidence or circumstances that they had yet. They keep saying it's very, you know, there's questions around her death. But according to what she was about to write, she said that Jack Ruby told her, if you knew how high this went, you'd be shocked.
Well, this is awesome. You know what I'm going to do? I just realized this, and I don't even know why I didn't think about this before. But my accountant is Oliver Stone's brother-in-law. His sister is married to Oliver Stone. So I'm going to reach out to him to see if we can possibly get Oliver to come on.
Oh my gosh.
Wow, that
I
would be
would
amazing.
love to give him this.
Wow.
Let him read it.
So I'm going to throw that out there. I'm going to throw that out in the universe because, you know, Sam's been, you know, because it was funny because like he was the first time I went to go to his office. His name's Sam Cho. He's a great accountant. He's from China. And I walked in there and like, he's got all Oliver Stone posters all over his, you know, in an accountant office. I'm like going, you know, I'm like, oh, all right. He guess he really likes Oliver Stone. Cause I said, first thing I said, and I said, I go, Sam, I go, you really like Oliver Stone. Don't you like his movie? He goes, oh, I love Oliver Stone. Oliver Stone's my brother-in-law. Oliver Stone put me, you know, got me my citizenship. Oliver Stone put me through accounting school. God, I love Oliver Stone. And I said, what's it? He goes, well, he's family. He's like an in-law. He's married to my sister. I go, wow. So it's like, I didn't know why it didn't click to me, but now that we're going down this road, and I would
love to have him on and let's tell this story.
It fuels, like, I mean, like, he's a JFK expert. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like I said, his last documentary, and the problem is his last documentary he didn't get because he's such a contrarian and controversial contrarian. Like, he doesn't really. I mean, he's basically been kicked out by Hollywood right now for which is ridiculous. He's like one of the most greatest American filmmakers that we've had, and so he's doing all this stuff independently. So yeah, but it's interesting.
We have to make it a 3-hour episode here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So
well,
that's the goal to our listeners. I want you all to manifest that we're going to get Oliver Stone on this podcast. I'm throwing it out there. I'm actually going to call Sam this afternoon, see if I can make that happen, or at least get me an introduction. But I think this kind of really falls within line to what he would be interested in. And he may have information. I mean, he's seen a lot of stuff. He's gotten, a lot of those files and stuff like that. But anyway, good way to end it, huh?
That is a very good way. I'll be waiting to hear from this.
I know. Stranger things have happened when I've said that, Yes. Like when Cindy and I were saying, well, we got to go find their families and stuff like that. And look at it. When you throw it out there, then then everything's kind of coming to fruition. So, all right, gentlemen, thank you so much.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Later.